Hi, welcome to Crime Clueless. We're your hosts. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Lara.
I'm Krista.
And I'm Kayla.
How are we doing today?
Good. Doing good. How are you?
So good.
It's nice out there today. We were out games this morning and getting some sun.
Love that. Yay for spring.
Yay.
Yay.
Not
It's supposed
looking
to be
forward.
so hot this week.
I know. Last
We
week
hit
was so
100
nice.
this week.
Yeah. It's going to be 100 this next week.
Thursday I saw. I
Wow.
think it's supposed to hit 100.
Not ready for that.
No, me neither.
Good thing it's the middle of summer. Oh, wait.
wait.
Oh, wait.
It's April.
And it was like 67 or something this
60,
last
like
week.
3.
Yeah,
was
we've been just up
59
and down.
here.
Yeah.
The high today, 72.
Oh,
It's so nice.
those are the
today.
nice ones.
Nice today.
I have a solved case for you today.
Yay.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
We love those.
It's a DNA one.
Nice.
Ooh,
Yeah. I like those.
I
Mhm.
like those too.
they're good mysteries.
Should we dive in?
Let's do it.
It was just before dawn on February 3rd, 1996, when a couple of regulars pulled into the Lil Champ convenience store in North Orange Blossom Trail in Orlando, Florida. They weren't there for snacks. They were there for money. Not in the robbery kind of way. This was routine.
Sure, like Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, we're starting out with a robbery. Okay.
Nope, these were the store's armored truck contractors, which was part of their scheduled cash pickup.
A nice misdirect.
Yeah, just a normal morning, or at least that's how it was supposed to be. The sun hadn't even come up yet. The fluorescent lights inside the store should have been flickering to life, and the parking lot was nearly empty. It was odd. It was quiet, eerily quiet, and something was off. The front door was locked. The store was dark. No one was behind the counter. No music playing over the radio. No hum of conversation or movement in the aisles. It was as if the store was in some kind of suspended animation. The two men walked around outside waiting. They called out. No answer. Everything seemed like it should just be a normal morning, except it wasn't. Usually by 6 a.m., regulars would have been grabbing their coffee and newspapers. One puzzled passerby noticed that the lights were still off all the way at 7 a.m. now, and the store was always open by then. Concerned, he plus the two armored truck workers phoned the Orange County Sheriff's Office, unknowingly setting in motion a decades-long quest for justice. Deputies arrived to find an eerily silent scene. The two armored truck employees were waiting outside. They were scheduled to pick up the previous night's cash deposit, but they hadn't been able to get in. The front door locked tight. Peering through the glass, officers saw no one inside. They did spot a small spear of... Nope.
Should be easier. Small smear.
Small smear.
Small smear.
They did spot a small spear. I don't know why it's so hard. They did spot a small smear of blood on the exterior door lock, an ominous sign that immediately escalated their concern. Calls to the store's phone rang unanswered, and a check of the parking lot found a white Honda belonging to the store manager, 31-year-old Terry Paquette, still sitting outside. They knocked, nothing. When deputies tried calling Terry's home, no one picked up. Luckily, right around then, another Lil Champ employee who lived nearby happened to drive past and saw all the commotion. He had closed up the store the night before, and he had a key. Likely as anxious as the officers, this employee handed over his spare keys so police could enter and see what was going on. And then they saw it, a streak of blood. It led to the bathroom door at the back of the store, a single-person restroom, closed, locked from the inside. Inside the bathroom, Terry was lying on the tile floor in a pool of blood. His body bore over 70 stab wounds.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So many.
So many. It was savage. It was frenzied. Blood spatter covered the walls, the sink, the ceiling. The killer hadn't just taken his life, they had obliterated any illusion that this was a robbery gone wrong. This was rage. This felt personal, and whoever did it had vanished. No sign of forced entry, no defensive wounds, no witnesses, no weapon. Just a store full of silence and a town full of questions. The brutality of the attack was immediately apparent. Terry had been stabbed 73 times in total. Many of the wounds were to his chest and torso, even piercing his heart and lungs, and his throat had been slit. It was a ghastly, rage-fueled killing. Like I said, blood spatter coated the bathroom, but it also trailed out into the store aisles, a sign that the violence hadn't been confined to one spot. Investigators at the scene described it as a horrific crime scene with blood everywhere. Clearly, whoever did this hadn't just wanted to incapacitate Terry, they had butchered him. By now, the store was ringed with crime scene tape, its cheerful Lil Champ facade transformed into the backdrop of a potential crime scene. The Lil Champ store was cordoned off by police tape on the morning of February 3rd, 1996. Behind the locked doors, deputies were trying to uncover this scene of unspeakable violence. As the deputies secured the scene, they began taking inventory of what might have happened. The store safe was found open, and roughly $1,000 in cash was missing. The likely motive initially appeared to be robbery. Curiously, Terry's keys were nowhere to be found, suggesting maybe the killer had stolen the keys and locked the front door on the way out to delay discovery.
Do they know if Terry's car was there?
It was there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't take the keys to steal his car or anything.
Yeah, probably just to lock the door behind them.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird.
And to this day, those keys have never been recovered.
I hope they
That's
changed all the locks.
interesting.
Wow.
I know, I hope so too. The killer had basically left Terry to die alone in a locked store, buying himself time to escape. With no witnesses around and the perpetrator gone without a trace, deputies at the Lil Champ that morning were left with a terrifying whodunit on their hands.
I'm sorry. I can't remember if you already said this. What year was this?
It was 1996.
Okay.
Almost exactly, 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Crazy. Wow. Who was Terry Paquette? In life, 31-year-old Terry was a hardworking everyman, chasing a simple piece of the American dream. A few years before his death, he had moved to the Orlando area looking for new opportunities. He landed the manager job at the Lil Champ store, where he quickly became known for his reliability and strong work ethic. Terry had clocked 60-plus hours a week at the store. Terry would open at the crack of dawn and often was the one closing late. Running a convenience store isn't exactly a glamorous gig. It meant long, tiring shifts and lots of responsibility. But Terry took pride in it. He was the guy who would have the coffee ready by 6 a.m. and knew his regular customers by name. Outside of work, Terry had a pretty quiet life. Coworkers and investigators later noted that he didn't have a large circle of friends or associates in Orlando. This wasn't because he was unfriendly. If anything, those who did know him described him as kind and easygoing. But working 60-plus hour weeks didn't leave much time for a social life. Originally from out of town, like I said, he had only been in Orlando a few years. Terry didn't have immediate family nearby. In fact, over the years following his murder, all of Terry's close family members passed away, meaning by the time this case was solved, no immediate family was still alive to see justice done. It's a heartbreaking footnote that underscores just how long this case languished. Terry's routine was incredibly regular, almost to a fault. He'd arrive at the Lil Champ between 5 and 5:30 a.m. each morning to prep for opening. He'd disable the alarm. Records show the store's alarm was turned off by 5:39 a.m. the morning of the murder. He'd start brewing coffee, counting the register, and getting the store ready for customers by 6.
There weren't any security cameras or anything in the convenience store?
I don't think so. Not in 1996. It was a solitary start to the day. Usually, he was alone in those early morning hours. Terry was literally the only employee on site at that time. For a killer looking for a window of opportunity, this routine made Terry an easy target. Alone with a store full of cash from the night before. Yet, those who knew Terry couldn't imagine who would want to hurt him. He had no known enemies, no sketchy entanglements, no angry exes, no debts with the mob, nothing obvious that would paint a bullseye on his back. In many ways, Terry was an unlikely victim, a friendly, hardworking guy with a mundane life. That made the ferocity of his murder all the more baffling. The investigation into Terry's murder began immediately, but the mid-90s were not exactly the golden age of forensic science, at least not compared to today. Orange County detectives had a blood-soaked crime scene, and one big thing going for them, the killer's blood. In the midst of the frenzy, the murderer had cut himself. Crime scene techs found drops and smears of blood in places Terry's blood logically shouldn't have been. On a beverage freezer handle, a freezer flap, the lottery ticket machine, the door's push bar, and lock, all spots away from the victim. Analysis confirmed that these samples came from one individual who was not Terry. In other words, the killer had literally left his DNA all over the store while bumbling around injured. Sounds like an open and shut case, right? Just test the blood and boom, you've got your guy. If only it were that easy in 1996. At the time, DNA profiling was in its relative infancy. Investigators could determine the blood all came from the same unknown suspect. But without a known person to compare it to or a DNA database hit, the blood evidence was essentially a genetic John Doe. In the pre-genetic genealogy era, the DNA was like a locked treasure chest with no key. As Sheriff John Mina later explained, there was no way to identify the murderer from the blood alone back then. They would need a matching sample from a suspect to make a case. And to get a suspect sample, you first needed a suspect. Detectives dutifully pursued the usual angles. They interviewed Terry's coworkers, past employees of the Lil Champ, and anyone who had been associated with the store. Was this a robbery gone wrong by a random thug, or did someone have a personal grudge? The sheer overkill of the attack, 73 stab wounds, is far beyond what's needed to subdue a victim, suggested a possibility that this was personal. Maybe Terry knew his killer and the attack was fueled by rage. Indeed, early on, some investigators felt certain Terry must have known the assailant, because who else would he let into a closed store at 5:30 a.m.? There were no obvious signs of forced entry, hinting that Terry either willingly let someone in or was ambushed by someone who somehow got inside. Every employee and acquaintance was questioned, and if they had any remote connection, asked for an alibi, and even asked to provide a blood sample. One by one, those leads fizzled out or were ruled out by the blood evidence when compared. Let's talk about Terry's roommate, because if we're being honest, when someone is murdered in such a personal, violent way, and really there's not that much sign of a robbery. I mean, $1,000 is not much.
Oh.
It's practically page 1 in the detective handbook to look at who was closest to the victim.
Well, and especially, I mean, like you already said, with that violent of an attack, that doesn't seem random. Or someone trying to be quick, just, and robbing the store, just kind of in and out like that feels a lot more personal.
Right. Agreed. And, someone who knew his routine, knew he would be there alone before opening.
Right.
Knew he was the one to open. I mean, 5:30 a.m. That's early.
And especially if like his routine was to come in, lock the door behind him, it seems like, it should have been someone that he knew.
Right. And it's not.
Oh, spoiler alert.
I know. I might take that out, but oh, it does though. It seems like it should absolutely be either someone who worked there.
Honestly, the fact that it's not makes it even scarier.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like all the ones that we've talked about where it's something like this violent, it's normally someone that you know.
Yeah.
Mhm. As police were looking at people closest, they looked at Terry's roommate and, he fits the description. For privacy reasons, the man's name was never released publicly, but sources close to the case described the roommate as quiet, a little withdrawn, and occasionally a little bit possessive of Terry. Terry, according to friends, was friendly, outgoing, and when he could, kept a busy social life. And while there was never any direct evidence that his roommate had romantic feelings for him, there were definitely tensions at home. Reports suggested that Terry had been talking about moving out. He wanted more independence. There were even whispers of an argument the week before the murder. He and Terry lived together in a modest apartment not far from the Lil Champ store. Bills were always paid, the place was relatively clean, and they didn't seem to have any major public fights. But friends of Terry's would later share that things weren't always exactly picture perfect behind closed doors. Like I said, Terry had confided in a friend that he was thinking about moving out. He said he felt like he needed space. And it wasn't like a big fight. It was just more of a we're growing apart type of situation. But it was clear Terry was ready to start a new chapter. And police thought maybe the roommate might not have been thrilled about that. Police brought him in for questioning shortly after the murder. And from the jump, there were red flags. Not flashing neon ones, but those subtle, quiet ones that make detectives start circling a little tighter. His alibi? Thin. He said he was home sleeping, alone, which, to be fair, it was 5:30 in the morning and his roommate was at work. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. However, he didn't have any noticeable injuries, and police didn't have enough to hold him. There was no physical evidence tying him to the crime scene, no fingerprints that they could link to him. Police kept coming back to him because, like I said, he'd been at home sleeping when Terry was killed. There were no witnesses to the crime, but also not really an alibi. Not even a pet could vouch for him. Just him and his word.
They're going to interrogate the dog.
The goldfish.
Oh, yeah. Maybe the gecko.
The geckos. The cat.
Yeah.
Cat won't talk to him.
Jenna has, 15 witnesses now if she's home alone?
Yeah.
I don't know. A cat might sell you out real quick.
Yeah, that's
Cat
true.
would. Cat would probably be the one responsible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. He was gone. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. No, it wasn't me.
You said that the roommate didn't have any injuries, though.
Right.
And the crime scene had blood from
So
killer.
they did get his blood, but it took longer than anybody would like for it to come back. So they're still trying to question him and, maybe hope they can get a confession or something.
He magicked his wounds away.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like with where the blood streaks were, it had to have been on his hand if he was grabbing
Right.
stuff,
Or or on his
Mhm.
arm, running down his hand, or maybe he touched it or something. But
yeah. I mean, because I could see if maybe it was something hidden by clothes, but on the water machine, stuff like that would have to be touching stuff.
I don't know if you're grabbing it, though.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
But I would think the same, especially if you're stabbing. It's probably going to be.
If you're trying to
Yeah,
and
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah. But they may have asked him.
Yeah.
I don't know if without a warrant, though, if you can search a person for
No, you
injuries.
cannot.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But I'm sure, it's Florida, but it is February, so colder,
Mhm.
It's not cold here, but we still wear a sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Especially at 5 a.m. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And probably wearing dark clothes and a hoodie if you're out trying to murder someone at 5 a.m, I would assume. I don't know. Probably not walking around in flip-flops.
Your murder clothes, yeah.
Yes.
I meant when he went into the interview, he could reasonably have cuts on his arms, but have like worn a sweatshirt to the interview.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
That's true.
That is what you meant.
Yep.
Not me thinking about the murder clothes in the morning.
I mean, it's a valid point also. I appreciate it. When the roommate was asked about their relationship, he claimed that everything was fine. They were just roommates. There were no issues, nothing unusual. But then under pressure, small inconsistencies started to show. Like he couldn't recall exactly when he last saw Terry or whether Terry had said anything about his shift that day. Police noted that while he wasn't cold or combative, he also wasn't exactly devastated. His affect was flat and detached, but maybe that's just who he was. Maybe
he was shocked.
Yeah, absolutely.
His roommate just got murdered.
Mm-hmm.
That would be scary because if you don't know who did it and you like really honestly didn't do it, you could assume now they have his keys. What do those keys open? Probably their apartment.
Yeah.
And everyone's going to exhibit shock differently,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to say that over and over and over.
Yes. Grief, shock, everything.
Yeah, it comes in different forms.
Different.
And it's always too much or not enough.
Yeah.
Yep.
Everyone's
To fit the
behavior
narrative. Yeah.
is suspicious.
Yeah.
Detectives wrote in their notes, however, that something felt off when they were talking to him. They also looked into whether the roommate could have been romantically interested in Terry. There were whispers from mutual friends that the roommate might have potentially been gay, but hadn't come out yet, that he may have had feelings for Terry he never expressed, or worse, that he had expressed them and had been rejected. If that were true and Terry was preparing to move out, they suspect that could be motive. But here's the problem. Again, no physical evidence. They asked him for the clothes he was wearing, no blood. They searched the apartment. They couldn't find anything linking him to the scene. And again, he had no defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle. They did ask him to take a polygraph. And again, not that polygraphs are exactly bulletproof, but still, they were grasping at anything. The results came back inconclusive, which, of course, is true crime's version of a shrug. Detectives also considered something darker. Could the roommate have killed Terry and then cleaned up so thoroughly that he left no trace? That theory didn't fit the crime scene. The murder was messy, uncontrolled, blood everywhere. A calculated killer would have done something, anything to cover it up, but the killer hadn't even tried. They'd left the scene like a ticking time bomb, ready to be discovered. That screamed impulse, emotion, and rage. So after weeks of surveillance, interviews, and quiet speculation, the roommate lead dried up. Without physical evidence, they couldn't make a move. He was never arrested, never charged, just quietly faded into the background. But here's the thing. When the case was revisited over the years and new detectives picked up the file, his name always made the short list. He lived in the shadow of that case for decades, always on the edge of suspicion, never cleared, but never charged.
That's kind of awful for him.
Yeah.
So
That'd be so sad.
That would be so awful every so often. It's like, no, I didn't do this over and over and over again.
Well, especially clearly a friend of his.
Yeah.
He gets to be reminded every so often that, not only he's a suspect, but of, probably a really dark time in his life.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Awful.
And they already took his blood. Like, I feel like if you submit to that, you would think it's kind of over. Like, you would be done. But instead, it's not.
You keep being cleared and then pick back up again, however many years later.
Yep.
Awful.
And the real kicker, he wasn't the killer.
Yeah.
For a long time, the weight of him being the killer, though, was a possibility that hung heavy. And it makes you wonder how many lives are changed, not just by being the victim of a crime, but by being the almost suspect. Without evidence, though, detectives were stuck with gut feelings and unanswered questions. The early 90s weren't exactly a safe or accepting time for LGBTQ plus individuals. especially in conservative corners in the South. And while Terry wasn't openly out to everyone in his life, those closest to him said he was starting to live a little bit more authentically, slowly, cautiously. He had a few friends in the gay community, and investigators discovered that he'd been to at least one LGBTQ-friendly bar in the area not long before his death. That detail alone opened up a darker possibility that Terry may have been targeted. Detectives explored whether his murder could have been the result of a hate crime. Perhaps someone he'd met socially who had later lashed out, or someone who had found out about his sexuality and acted on prejudice. But again, no solid leads. No threats were reported. No one came forward claiming to have heard or seen aggressive behavior towards Terry. If someone hated him for who he was, they did it in silence until they didn't. Investigators canvassed local bars, showed photos around, asked bartenders and patrons if anyone remembered seeing Terry or if he'd been in any altercations. Some vague descriptions surfaced. A guy he had talked to a couple times, maybe someone with dark hair. They might have left together, but none of it ever led anywhere definitive. There was also a growing fear in law enforcement at the time that the killer might not have known Terry at all, that this could have been a thrill kill, a random, opportunistic predator. There had been other violent crimes in the area. Theories of a possible serial offender quietly circulated. Could someone have followed Terry? Could they have waited for the perfect moment when the store was empty, when Terry was alone, and then struck with explosive violence?
I hate those ones.
I know. They're so scary.
It's scary. It makes you think the what ifs.
Yeah.
I don't like those.
Me neither.
No.
Who was it? The mom that we discussed? What was her name?
Robin.
Robin. Yes, I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
Too.
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's
When I
so
think about,
scary.
Nancy, she's in
Yeah.
her apartment. Her roommate was there.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I hear a lot going on in my apartment complex, sometimes too much. But
Mhm.
I'm like, what if someone did hear and they just, didn't
I mean,
think it was anything,
same with
Yeah.
Christine,
Yeah.
Frankie, and that was in the same area.
Yeah.
Almost the same time, too.
These make me a little paranoid sometimes.
Mhm.
Yep.
But the point is to be proactive,
Yeah. And, I try and lock my doors, be safe and everything. But it's
Mhm.
still like sometimes I'm like, what if I forget? And it's that one night.
Mm-hmm. Can't forget.
I know. The worst feeling is when I wake up in the morning and I go to turn off my alarm and I'm like, it's already off. Okay.
Super.
Good job.
So I have mine on a schedule. It turns on at 9:30 every night and turns off at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Nice.
That'd be nice if I had a consistent bedtime.
Well, you can turn, and then if you have to do something, you could turn it off and then back
I
on.
don't remember the number of times I've set off my own alarm.
Well, let
you
your neighbors
have an
know you're still
alarm?
there. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But at least you know every night it is getting turned on.
Yeah. No, that is a good idea.
Or you could have it even be like at midnight or something, just so at least it turns on every night.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I had to set mine back when mom and dad were staying at my house. Like, we go to bed earlier than you guys.
I know they stay up later than I do too.
I know whenever I stay at their house, I'm like, okay, I'm ready for bed now.
Please, can I go to bed?
We just have a bunch
They're
of cameras
night
everywhere.
owls.
They're night owls.
Yeah.
We just have hip parents
Yep.
partying harder than we are.
This is true.
I was.
But
I
we get up like 3 hours earlier than they do. So
No. Mom was up by 8 today. Dad's usually up by 6:30 or 7. They're not sleeping in.
That
Yeah.
sounds like my schedule. I go to sleep 11 or 12 and then get up at 8 or 7:30.
Mhm.
For now. My toddler's a
hate
night owl like
staying
I
up
am.
till 11.
Had to stay
I
up till
just couldn't go to sleep. I was ready
Yeah.
to go upstairs and I got into bed and I just laid there for 30 minutes. And then my dog was up at 3 and I got to experience fear at 3 o'clock in the morning when I walked around my house because I was thinking about Robin.
Witching hour.
Yes. I don't know where I learned that, but every time my dog wakes me up at 3 to go to the bathroom, I think about that. And then I have to walk around my dark house
Yeah.
And it freaks me out.
Oh, all right. Let's drive this back
Sorry.
to...
I'll take the blame for that one.
No.
Welcome to my brain.
All of ours. Welcome.
What did we start with? Alarm systems and ended up with dogs.
Yeah.
And we made it there somehow.
Mhm. It made sense. Yeah. Anyways, lock your doors, put your alarm on.
Maybe get cameras.
Detectives analyzed similar cases in the area, unsolved stabbings, assaults, but there was nothing with quite the same intensity or signature. And so that theory too faded into the background.
That's interesting to me because if there were like unexplained stabbings, just because this one had more,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that means they couldn't be connected. That's odd to me.
And I'm wondering, like, what kind of area they're looking in, if they're looking in like the whole city or the whole county. And so it happens, but yeah. It is odd.
Like it could be maybe this time he was fighting back more. So he was attacking more,
Absolutely. It became a case of almost a motive with a roommate, almost a pattern with other violent crimes, almost a hate crime, but no suspect. And behind all of it, a grieving family who just wanted answers. In the 1990s, DNA testing was still in its awkward adolescent phase, limited, time-consuming, and often unreliable with degraded or mixed samples. They had a DNA profile pulled from the scene, but no one to match it to. No database to run it against. CODIS, the FBI's DNA system, didn't even launch until 1998. And even then, it would take years to become comprehensive. So the sample sat, preserved, untouched, waiting. And as the years passed, the detectives who'd once been consumed by the case retired, transferred, or were reassigned. But the file remained, and so did that DNA sample.
That makes me happy. Like, I'm glad that nothing happened to it. They didn't just like, well, we're not going to figure this one out. Like, I'm always glad when they do preserve it for just in case.
Me too. Absolutely. Because it is very often where they want to go back and test it and they can't.
Yeah.
Or there's not enough. And so they wait and wait and wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the end of 1997, with no witnesses, no DNA match, and no viable suspects, the case hit a wall. Terry's case was officially shelved as a cold case, marked, quote unquote, pending further investigative leads. Over the ensuing years, periodic efforts were made to revive the investigation. In 2003, Orange County's cold case unit took another crack at the case. They retested evidence and excluded a few people as possible suspects based on DNA, perhaps previous persons of interest who didn't match the unknown profile, but they still couldn't positively ID anyone. The mystery blood didn't match any profiles in the criminal DNA databases, meaning the perpetrator likely had no prior felony record that required giving a DNA sample. With no leads, the case went cold yet again. The frustrating truth was that Terry's killer had left plenty of evidence, but that evidence was ahead of its time. It would sit in storage for nearly 25 years while science caught up.
Wow.
It's crazy how much technology has improved in such a short amount of time.
Yes. And new and more amazing things are coming.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's really promising too for all these cases like this where the killer just left behind tons of stuff. And now, as long as it was preserved correctly, people might actually get some justice, which is great.
Well, yeah, because I'm sure at the time, whoever it was like, well, there were no witnesses, there's no cameras, so they're not going to be able to catch me.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. And it wouldn't even matter if you left DNA behind because
they can't test it.
Matter.
Especially if he had, or whoever it was, had no prior, run-ins with law enforcement. Their DNA wasn't already in the system.
Yep. That's why my favorite tagline from one of the shows I listened to is like, if you're the bad guys, they're coming for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they're working on it.
Yeah.
It's getting faster and cheaper and easier. They need less.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. If I get murdered, someone will catch them.
Yes.
Sooner, though.
Sooner. Yeah.
But
We won't
lock
have
your
to wait
doors. Don't
25
get
years.
murdered. I would miss you a lot.
Well, I'm
Yes.
not planning on it. Thank you. I'd miss you too. And I'm not planning on it. I'm just saying, should something happen.
Yes.
Okay. Meanwhile, theories swirled in the background. Some in law enforcement thought the robbery motive was too convenient. The extreme violence suggested maybe the money theft was secondary, a cover for a personal vendetta. Others wondered if Terry could have been a victim of a hate crime. It sounds far-fetched, but with no suspects, nothing off the table, detectives even considered if something about Terry's background or identity made him a target for that level of rage. Ultimately, none of those theories could be proven. No suspects, no arrest, no justice. For over 2 decades, the Terry Paquette case gathered dust, and the Lil Champ murder became local criminal lore. A whodunit that haunted the Orlando community and Orange County sheriffs who never forgot it. With the case cold for so long, both investigators and amateur sleuths chewed over possible theories. One theory was the straightforward one. This was a robbery gone wrong, perpetrated by a thief who hadn't expected Terry to fight back. Perhaps the robber panicked when Terry resisted and unleashed a frenzy of stabbings. That explanation covered the missing money and the brutal violence. But it left some questions. Why stab him dozens upon dozens of times? Why lock the door and take the keys afterward? A rather thoughtful move for a panicked robber. Another theory leaned into the overkill. Maybe this was personal. Perhaps someone who had a serious grudge against Terry, a disgruntled former employee, an angry customer, someone he used to date. Who knows? The robbery was staged to mislead investigators. Indeed, as mentioned, detectives early on felt that Terry likely knew his killer. The lack of forced entry and the timing, pre-opening hours, hinted that Terry may have let his murderer into the store voluntarily, meaning it could have been someone he trusted, at least initially. It also could have been because he was a nice guy and someone said they needed one thing real quick before the store opened.
Or they needed to run to the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's a comment. Hey, we're driving by. Like, can we please use your bathroom really quick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This line of thinking made investigators comb through Terry's personal life and relationships with a fine-toothed comb, and they came up empty. By all accounts, Terry was well-liked, not involved in anything nefarious. If someone bore him ill will, nobody in his life knew about it. In the absence of evidence, some theories drifted into the speculative. The notion of a hate crime was also considered. Was there something about Terry, religion, sexuality, something that could have incited this kind of attack? This idea didn't have any clear basis in known facts, but such extreme violence made investigators explore every angle, including irrational ones like hate-fueled rage. No evidence supported this. It remained in an unchecked box in the realm of possibilities. On the more conspiratorial end, locals tossed around rumors. Could it have been a serial killer passing through town? If so, this crime didn't match any known serial killer MO at the time, and no similar cases cropped up nearby. Maybe it was a professional hit. Unlikely, since professionals don't stab someone 73 times and steal petty cash.
And leave their blood all over the store.
Mm-hmm.
Could it have been a gang initiation or drug-fueled something? With so few clues, the void was filled by speculation. But Orange County detectives, to their credit, never gave up. This case stayed on the radar, if only on the back burner. And in the 2000s and then the 2010s, as they rolled on, forensic technology was advancing. By the late 2010s, a new tool had emerged that could finally shine a light on the secrets hidden in that blood that was left on the freezer handle, a tool that would crack the Terry Paquette case wide open. By 2019, genetic genealogy, the same technique that caught the Golden State Killer, was the hot new method for solving cold cases. The Orange County Sheriff's Office decided it was time to bring out the big guns, or rather, the big test tubes. Detective Brian Savelli took a fresh look at the evidence and, in collaboration with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, sent the unknown DNA from the crime scene for advanced testing. The sample went to a private lab, Ortham, in Texas, that specializes in forensic genealogy. This lab was able to sequence the DNA and upload the profile to genealogy databases to find potential family matches. What came back was the break everyone had been hoping for. In March 2021, the results indicated that the mystery DNA belonged to someone related to a couple named Kenneth Stough Jr. and Carol Ann Crawford. Investigators discovered this couple had married years ago and had 3 sons. One of those sons immediately jumped out. Kenneth Robert Stough Jr. Now, he was a 54-year-old man living in Florida, and lo and behold, detectives learned that back in 1996, Stough lived just 2 blocks from Terry Paquette and had even worked at the very same Lil Champ store at one point.
Oh, yeah, that would jump out.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I thought, had you said that they had looked at people who had worked there in the past? Was he not one that they looked at just because it was like a short stint or longer ago than what they were looking?
I think it had been a little bit longer than what they were looking for. And also, they were focused more on people who still worked there.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Because they have a cash drawer. And in the 5s, if you take the bottom 5, it calls the police.
Oh.
That 5 was left in the drawer.
Oh, interesting.
So they should have known that it was someone that worked there.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Talk about hiding in plain sight. The genealogical lead had pinpointed someone who had more connection to Terry and the Lil Champ than anyone had known. In fact, Kenneth Stough Jr. had never been on investigators' radar. He was truly a ghost to the investigation. Detectives had literally never heard of him during the initial probe, despite him having worked at the store, even though apparently it was before Terry worked there. And he also lived nearby. That's likely because Stough had moved on, and no one in Terry's immediate circle remembered or mentioned him back then.
So he never worked at the Lil Champ the same time as Terry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they had this, I think they were really invested that it was someone that knew him.
Yeah.
So when searching the people that had worked there, I think they really focused on those that had worked there with him because he'd also been there for a few years.
Okay.
Well, that would make more sense, especially if they thought the crime felt more personal.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, armed with this lead, detectives needed to confirm that Stough's DNA matched the crime scene DNA. Genetic genealogy can point a finger, but you still need direct evidence to make an arrest. In August 2021, investigators quietly got a judge to sign off on a clandestine plan. They placed a GPS tracker on Stough's vehicle to monitor his movements. If Stough was their guy, they needed a way to collect his DNA without tipping him off. On September 14th, 2021, detectives tailed Stough as he drove to a local convenience store near his home in Eustis. After buying a few things, Stough did something that made the officers want to high-five each other. He dumped a gray plastic bag full of empty beer cans into a public dumpster. Jackpot.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as Stough left, the detectives swooped in and retrieved the trash bag, guarding it like it was the Holy Grail. Inside were 7 Budweiser beer cans. Apparently, our guy Stough liked a few brews, and in doing so, he'd left his saliva all over the can rims. One of those cans was sent off for DNA analysis, and the result came back crystal clear. Stough's DNA profile matched the unknown blood from the 1996 Lil Champ murder. In other words, the blood that had been left on the freezer handle, the lottery machine, the door lock, etc., was his. The probability of that being a coincidence was basically zero. After 25 years, science and a little dumpster diving had finally nailed the killer.
How crazy would that be for him? I mean, he's gone 25 years without any kind of, justice or anything. He probably thinks everybody's forgotten about it. He's just moved on.
He'd never even been interviewed about it.
Exactly. Yep. So he's like, oh, well, I got away with it. And then 25 years later, just kidding.
Yep.
I'm so glad that they caught him, but like that would be so weird.
Yep.
As soon as police show up, do you immediately go, okay, this is what it is? Or are you like, oh, I wonder what this is about?
Yeah. Well, remember in Robin's case, his comment, he said, I can't believe it took you this long.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I would at least be guilty. I would think about it every single day. So
how could you not?
Well, and how could you not be paranoid every day that they're going to find you?
Yeah.
As Detective Savelli put it, the DNA on the item that he had matched the DNA at the crime scene. Case closed. This was a landmark moment for the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Their first homicide case solved using genetic genealogy. When they arrested Kenneth Robert Stough Jr. on November 1st, 2021, on charges of first-degree murder and armed robbery, it likely felt surreal. Here was a man who had gotten away with a vicious murder for a quarter century. Now in handcuffs because he tossed out his beer cans on a Wednesday. So, perhaps, realizing the jig was up, did not make any dramatic confessions. In fact, when questioned, he admitted only that he had worked at the Lil Champ store in the past, but he denied committing the murder. Nice try, Kenny. The DNA evidence says otherwise. With the DNA match in hand, investigators had what they needed, denial or not. The cold case had finally thawed and an arrest had been made. With Kenneth identified as the killer, investigators and prosecutors were able to piece together how the crime likely unfolded on the fateful morning in 1996. Picture the scene. It's still dark out as Terry Paquette goes about his opening routine inside the Lil Champ. He's disarmed the alarm at 5:39 a.m. and is brewing that first pot of coffee, perhaps counting the till. The front door is locked to keep early birds out until 6 a.m. Enter Kenneth Stough, age 28, lurking with malice aforethought. Stough likely approached the store before opening. He knew Terry would be alone. Perhaps Terry recognized him, maybe as someone who lived down the street, and being the nice guy he was, let him in early. More likely, Stough concocted some ruse, maybe asking to use the bathroom, or just wanting to get something really quick to get Terry to unlock the door. The moment Terry turned his back, Stough made his move. Prosecutors suspect the motive was robbery, plain and simple. Stough knew the routine. The store safe held a pile of cash from the previous day, and an armored pickup truck was due that morning. He probably figured he could snag the money before the armored truck arrived and get rid of the sole witness, Terry, in the process. Once inside, Stough likely confronted Terry at knife point and demanded access to the safe. We can imagine Terry, startled, confused, may have tried to reason with him or may have refused. A struggle ensued. Terry was presumably fit, but Stough was desperate and armed with a knife. The fight may have moved towards the back of the store where the restroom was. In the chaos, Terry was stabbed repeatedly. The ferocity of the attack suggests Stough lost control, delivering stab after stab in a frenzy. Terry fought back hard enough that Stough did cut himself, leaving his own blood dripped and smeared on surfaces as he moved through the store.
Did they ever find out a motive for anything, or did he always deny that it wasn't him?
Robbery.
Yeah.
His wife, so he was driving long haul trucks, and she did say that he had to go to the hospital for cut wounds. And she remembered that. And he said it was from something like unloading what was in the truck. And there was something with his insurance, like he didn't want to use it. And he said it was because he hadn't been at this position very long and it wouldn't cover it anyways.
So he was trying to make it so there was no record.
That they couldn't go to the hospital and say, hey, did anybody come in with a bunch of knife wounds? And they could trace it to someone.
Yeah.
But he did have to go in for that. So.
Okay.
Yeah. But such a jerk to not say why or give the real story. Like, you're caught. Your DNA was everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not say what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just wondered if it was maybe he had seen him go to that club that we talked about, or I don't know, maybe he was jealous about him taking his job. Just a lot of questions I still was curious about.
It's more just he knew the processes and procedures for the store. He knew when the pickup was.
Yeah.
He knew about the $5 bill in the register. He, I think, thought there would be more, and also thought that he could get a bunch of lottery tickets. He had gambling debt he needed to pay back.
So
and
it was probably money motivated.
It was money, and it was that store because he knew all the details about that store. It had nothing really to do with Terry himself.
Yeah, especially leaving like that $5 bill, like that.
Yeah, I can't imagine, like, you don't know this person. You're going to go in there, you know you want to rob it. Like, if someone came in and said they wanted to rob my store, I would be like, go for it. Like, I am not getting into this, whatever.
Same.
Like, why wouldn't he at knife point say, go lock yourself in the bathroom or something and then rob the store and leave?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Even
it just
like,
seems excessive for a robbery.
Say, you know, if police come knocking at my door, I'll come back. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean,
something.
I don't,
Like going with the mask. He doesn't know you. They didn't work together at the same time. I don't know.
I do also wonder if he wasn't planning to kill him because he did pick a time when it was someone he had not worked with.
Yeah.
Would he have known who was there at that time, though?
I don't know. I mean, you could have been coming in and out and checking, you know, routines.
But I mean,
seeing when people you know were there and when
one could have traded a shift. I mean, I feel like it was more about knowing that the armored truck was coming that day and knowing that the safe would be full.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
That's really unfortunate.
It is.
It's very sad.
Yeah, I agree. And I wish that we knew some of those answers, you know? Yeah.
I always hate that. I'm like, just tell us that you did it. We know it's you.
Yeah.
And why?
And why?
Yeah.
I want the why.
Then,
yeah.
that was the only time.
Yeah. I mean, the why is money. Yeah. And he knew how the store worked.
But why did you attack him so viciously?
Yeah.
That's kind of why.
Why. Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't feel like back then they knew being stabbed that many times made it personal. And maybe they did, but maybe you do that so that they look in other areas.
I don't know.
You know?
Yeah.
Because they did spend a lot of time looking at the roommate and friends on personal connections and not people who knew the store well enough to leave the $5 bill.
Yeah.
Wounded, but full of adrenaline, Stough ensured Terry was incapacitated. The slash across Terry's throat was likely the final fatal blow. After the brutal deed, Stough had to get the cash and get out fast. He found the store safe, and, you know, he may have already had Terry open it under duress, or Stough had forced him to open it, or that's why he got the keys and that was on there too. He grabbed roughly $1,000 in cash, which was the deposit from the night before. It breaks my heart too when someone is killed over $1,000.
Yeah.
500, 300.
Even any amount.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, senseless.
Desperate.
Yep. Before fleeing, Stough knew he had one more task. He had to delay discovery. He headed for the exit, Terry's keys in hand, either taken off of Terry or from the counter, and locked the door behind him as he left. This step bought him time To any outsider, it simply looked like the store hadn't opened on time. Meanwhile, inside that locked store, Terry Paquette lay dying or was already dead on the bathroom floor, and evidence of the struggle was everywhere.
So sad.
So sad. Stough vanished into the early morning light, likely ditching the knife and Terry's keys along the way. Neither has ever been found. He probably thought he had pulled off the perfect crime. No witnesses, no immediate suspects, and cash in his pocket. If not for modern forensics, he might have been right. The reconstructed chain of events paints Stough as a calculating yet vicious perpetrator. He used a position of trust, former employee or a neighbor or something, to catch Terry off guard, and he showed extraordinary cruelty in the execution of the crime.
Jenna, did you say his wife knew that he had done it?
She didn't know he had done it, but when they questioned her later,
she remembered.
She remembered him being cut. Yeah.
How do you not hear about this murder and not be like, right? All of a sudden we have $1,000 extra and
she never saw that money.
Well, if he had gambling debts, it probably went straight to someone.
Yeah, that's probably true. But,
or he went and gambled it away to make more money.
Right.
Yeah. She didn't see the money, but the wounds, he was convincing enough in how he got them.
And it's your husband too. You don't want to believe that they murdered someone and took cash from the rich,
Yeah.
I believe, and I'll have to double check, but I believe at this point she was his ex-wife.
Oh, okay.
She was more willing to talk.
Yeah. Well, after the gambling debts and,
Yeah, that was a good question, though. The overkill, 73 stab wounds, indicates rage, whether that was personal anger towards Terry or the unhinged desperation of a robber silencing a witness. Only Stough knows. In the end, what truly nailed him was that he injured himself in the attack, blood all over the crime scene, and created a very real trail of breadcrumbs that would lead to his undoing, albeit decades later. It's grimly poetic. The killer left his own blood at the scene of a bloodbath he created. For 25 years, that blood evidence sat in storage, waiting for technology to catch up and speak for Terry when Terry no longer could. After the arrest of Kenneth Stough Jr. in late 2021, the wheels of justice began to turn, slowly but surely. Stough, maintaining a facade of innocence, pleaded not guilty and thus forced the case to trial. It would take almost 2 more years to bring the case to court.
Oh, wow.
Partly due to backlogs. It is COVID times and the complexity of a 25-year-old case. Finally, in August 2023, 27 and a half years after Terry's murder, an Orange County jury was selected to hear the evidence. One can only imagine Stough's defense attorney sweating over how to explain away the damning DNA evidence. Yes, my client's blood was at the scene of a 1996 murder in a store he used to work at, but we promise it's not what it looks like. They tried to explain away that he went in there to use the bathroom and he got cut and it was before what happened. It just was bad timing. So yes, his DNA was there, but he didn't do it.
That's really bad timing.
Yeah. Really bad timing because also the store wasn't open yet. So,
and it's over everything, not just in one little spot.
I think they might have even tried to say that it was like the night before and it didn't get cleaned up and then he wasn't there the next morning.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
In all likelihood, the defense tried to suggest some contamination, these other alternate explanations, but those arguments were long shots at best. The prosecution laid out the case, the decades-old crime scene evidence, the DNA trail leading to Stough, the genetic genealogy that pointed to his family and his proximity and past connection to the store. They had zeroed in on the right man, and the jury saw it. After only a 5-day trial, the jury returned a guilty verdict for first-degree murder on August 25th, 2023. Stough, at age 56, was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder of Terry Paquette. Additionally, he was found guilty of armed robbery, though the life sentence for murder overshadowed any lesser penalties. For a crime this heinous, Florida could have considered the death penalty, but Since it was not pursued, possibly due to the age of the case or evidentiary considerations, life behind bars would have to suffice. Frankly, spending the rest of his natural life in a prison cell is a fitting fate for a man who took Terry's life in such a brutal way. When the verdict was announced, there was a bittersweet sense of closure. Justice delayed, but not justice denied. It was unfortunate that none of Terry's immediate family were alive to hear the guilty verdict. Detectives had tracked down a few of Terry's old friends to inform them of the long-awaited arrest and conviction. Those friends and the community that still remembered the horror at the Lil Champ could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The case that had loomed over Orange County for decades was resolved. Sheriff John Mina praised the outcome, highlighting the diligent work of his cold case team and the miracle of modern forensic science that cracked the case. In the end, the Terry Paquette case stands as a testament to persistence and technological progress in criminal investigations. The morning the Lil Champ store didn't open on time, a terrible secret was locked inside, but that secret couldn't stay hidden forever. It took 25 years, dogged investigators, cutting-edge DNA technology, and maybe a little luck. Thank you, discarded Budweiser can, who finally catch a killer who thought he'd gotten away with it. Kenneth Stough Jr. will now spend the rest of his life in prison, a fate he earned many times over. As for Terry Paquette, we can only hope that the belated justice offers some peace. The next time someone tells you you can't hide from the past, remember this case. In the end, the past and a bit of DNA caught up with the killer, and a cold case was brought in from the cold. What do you guys think?
Oh, I'm so glad they caught him.
Just thinking that. Just want anyone that's done bad things like this to get caught.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I know we've talked about this with other cases, but I'm so grateful that they hold on to DNA from these cold cases for that long. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
So many things could have gone wrong. Someone would have been like, oh, this is a cold case. Let's just get rid of it. But, to keep that DNA for decades, for the hope that one day it might be solved is always something that's a positive to me.
Yeah.
And stored correctly, not knowing that this kind of technology is coming.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty amazing.
The blind hope that eventually something will happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Fully agree. It's sad to me that his family wasn't, no one like in his immediate family was alive to see justice for that. But
yeah, me too.
I'm glad that there were still some friends or people in the community who could feel that sense of relief. And
I wonder, especially his roommate, I don't know if his roommate was still around, but to have it finally closed and you're not a recurring suspect anymore.
Yeah, I couldn't look that up because his name was never put out. So
he would have been about 50, 60-ish. So probably still alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably good that they never put that out, especially since it didn't end up being him, that he didn't have to live with decades of suspicion.
Yes,
for sure.
It'd be so
it's a good one. I like the ones that are solved, and the DNA ones are always
I know, it's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode with us. We are so grateful. If you have any comments on this case, send them to us, crimeclueless@gmail.com, or on our social media. Search for us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube at Crime Clueless. We'd love if you would share this episode to keep Terry's case alive and his memory strong. You can listen to any episode from us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, and all major streaming platforms.
And if you like us, give us a follow on all of our socials.
Yes, it really helps us reach more people that might be interested in these cases. We really appreciate it. If you're looking for resources we use in this episode, you can head to our blog. You can find it linked on our website, crimeclueless.com, under the contributor section. And remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murderers.
Bye.
Bye,
everybody.
Bye.